welcome to this now episode 3 of series 1 of the Youth Soccer Coaches webinar, hosted by me, Craig Scott. I'm pleased that you're able to join me as I welcome Charlie Bill to discuss building a culture to create positive performances. Lots of sign-ups, lots of people really interested in this one, including myself. So as ever, we encourage questions through the chat. So they could be to general in the chat, or they could be to me directly, and we'll touch upon them a bit later on. So try and ensure that mics are off just to minimize any disturbance from anybody else. Just a reminder, you can find us on Twitter at Youth Soccer Coaches, Facebook at Youth Soccer Coaches, and our website www.youthsoccercoaches.com. So our webinars are recorded and posted on a later date. On next webinar, we have Chris Holtz, UEFA A licence and UEFA B licence futsal coach, that's going to discuss the development of futsal and details on the pathway and some tips to consider. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Charlie.
Morning, afternoon, evening all. Firstly, thank you, obviously, Craig, and thank you for inviting me onto this webinar. Hopefully, kind of the next 25 minutes, half an hour, what I deliver, you can kind of take away some little messages away from it, some little wins. Like I said, and like Craig said, there is definitely some chance to ask some questions at the end. So if you do have any questions, eat throughout. Like I said, I'll probably leave them till the end, but please feel free to fire away and answer them. So morning, evening, afternoon all. So firstly, what kind of Craig delivered there? So I'm going to spend the next kind of 20-25 minutes going through what this looks like now. I'm using this with MK Dons William. Now, to give context, we are tier 3 within the pyramid in female football. So if those of you know, either men's or women's games, so you've got the obviously Women's Super League Championship, then we have a North and South divide, but both equivalent to tier 3 at women's level. Similar, if you were looking at the men's Premier League, you've got Championship, and then you've got League One. So that's where we sit in the women's pathway and the pyramid. And the idea today was I was very much looking at culture and values and how we've started to. I've been involved with the women's side probably 4 or 5 years now. My role was assistant manager. It then stepped up into a joint management role, and within the last 2 years, just over 2 years, it's now become a senior manager role on my own. And what I wanted to do is really talk about how we've managed to change the culture and develop these values that underpin what we do. Now, when I first designed this, or when I first started, I've been on a couple of podcasts as well. I used the terminology culture over performance, but then very quickly, when I was reflecting myself, I thought it's fantastic having the culture over performance and really trying to push that culture. However, we are still in a business where we need to get 3 points and we need to stay in the league or try and push and develop. So actually, we could set the right culture and the right values, but ultimately, we still need performances. We still need to have the performances on the pitch. So very quickly, that changed. I felt actually that's not the right message that I want to give. So it was now developing the right culture to create positive performances. So if we could allow our culture or values to impact and make positive performances, then I felt we were doing something right, or we were going down the right route. So that was something that I was certainly looking at. Now, hopefully through this webinar, you'll be able to take little messages where you can either recreate within your clubs, within your environments as well. Because one thing I will enforce is I'm not doing this 6-7 times as a full-time role. So this is still a part-time role. We still, as I say, contact time 2 or 3 times a week. So it's not I'm having to do bits above and beyond this to drive the culture and values. So the driving question that I try and follow throughout this PowerPoint is, are your values consistently followed by staff and players? So that's, as I say, you might believe that you've got these values or you've got this culture, and I certainly did first, and what I was allowed to reflect on was, were they really followed by everyone? Was it the club? Was it the culture that the whole club, the whole players, the whole staff, that's the S&C staff, the physio, the goalkeeping coach, are they all buying into that? And at first it was more my beliefs and everyone buy into it. And very slowly I understood that didn't work. So previously, like I said, no, that didn't work. So what were our values? So, and what I kind of put there was, did the players know what the values were? Were the players involved in the process? So no. So decided by staff, we kind of got together and communicated out to the players. So these are the values that we want you to show. This is the culture we want you to create. But actually, were they part of that process? And start off with no, they wasn't. How are our values being shown? So again, values is a big thing. Culture. We had print-offs. We put them in the dressing room. We put them in the change room. But were they being reinforced? Were every moment, every minute, either in football, away from football, were they being reinforced? At that moment in time, no. You could see them. We would maybe go back to them during poor performances, or if we didn't feel like we showed our levels on the pitch. But actually, they were just kind of little messages, but nothing that was being enforced. So what was needed? So ultimately it was, and probably during the last lockdown as well, it was allowed for me to certainly look and impact and go, what was needed? And the big thing that was needed was change both on and off the pitch. And that doesn't just mean change of personnel and people coming in and out. That just means, as I say, there was change that was needed to be able to change what this culture looks like, and something that I was then trying to drive forward. And again, you might then ask the question, so how did I develop, or how did we develop these values that will create the culture of the club? And that might be a question or a driving question that you see at the moment. So actually, how do you develop these values? You're talking about culture, values. What do they mean, and how do you show them in practice? Ultimately, what happened was it was to ensure that all players were a part in had an involvement in the process. So that was one of the most important things. It had to involve everyone into the process. If everyone was going to buy into this, if everyone was going to drive this forward, then they had to play such a big part in this process. Ensure all staff have the involvement in the process. Again, even if you're a manager, a joint manager, assistant, everyone has to have that involvement within it. And hopefully, if you was to speak to my staff, they would believe that they have a big part to play in this journey as well. It's not like you're an assistant manager standing alongside me. You're a goalkeeper coach. You're just understanding what the goalkeepers are doing. You're just a physio who's working on the players. And actually, it's them showing the values. It's them having them values and culture, and them buying into it and having equal as much responsibility as myself, and them understanding that as well, and understanding their actions as well, and what they've got to look to drive forward. I said try to get an individual and a team point of view. So what I mean by that is, it's okay understanding that, like I said, that you might get, I know, the team want this, the team want that, but actually speak to individuals, because they might have their own different little beliefs that they might want to develop, or they might want to drive forward. Now, that doesn't mean it has to underpin all the core values, because you might end up getting 14, 15, 16 different messages. But actually take away little bits from each individual, that how you can support them. Ensure you keep some of your own beliefs and views as a coach. Of course, like I said there, you want to include the players and the staff in the process, but don't go away from your own beliefs. You'll have your own beliefs and values that you believe, almost like non-negotiables, that should be shown. You should believe 2 or 3 things at least that you want to see from your team, whether that's either on the pitch or whether that's off the pitch as well. And reinforce these throughout the season. So don't just reinforce them when it's going bad. Even when you're winning, even when you go through bad spells, even when you go through good spells, make sure you're reinforcing them. And I'll go back to our values at the moment, and at the same, more than happy to share what our values are, but I've had to reinforce them, and I've had the price when I haven't followed them as well from players. So it works both ways. It doesn't just work, we expect this of you, we expect that of you, and we don't show it, there is no repercussions. We should also get the same message. If we're not good enough as coaching staff, if we don't hold these values, if we don't hold this culture high enough that you expect, tell us. And there's been quite an open kind of relationship with players, that players are beginning to trust both myself and the coach staff to speak up, to have these conversations. How were these? So again, a big question might be, how were these developed? So firstly, one of the big things was a questionnaire was created and sent to all players individually. So I'm very much, I didn't want to do it in a room where I know that there's big conversations, then someone else's mindset might have been changed by someone else who said it becomes a detailed discussion between I believe this, I believe that. So I created a questionnaire, and this had four different sections. So it had about kind of themselves, it had about the team, it had about what they wanted to develop, how us as staff could develop them, and then how players could develop each other. And there was four, as I say, 3 or 4 questions. So it was about 10 to 12 questions. And ultimately, what I wanted to see was, one, was their journey in football and a little bit more about them, because we might have a 16-year-old who stepped out of our RTC, which is equivalent to an academy, and they might want to be playing at the highest level possible. They might have aspirations to go and play for an Arsenal, or Chelsea, Man City. Fantastic. We can still try and support them from that journey. We might also have a player who's 30, 31, who actually goes, you know what, I just want to use my experience to help younger players and enjoy the last couple of years of my football. Not a problem. We just get an understanding of where we're pushing each individual. And part of that questionnaire, it was, what core values do you want to show? So what are your main 3 non-negotiables and main 3 core values? And ultimately, what we knew in the end was, we knew that some consistent messages were going to come out. And there was 4 consistent repeated messages which allowed us to make our core values. So some of these questions was, what does the outside world think of us right now? And again, there was such honesty in that. By doing this questionnaire, I spoke to them all and I said, please trust me that if you say, I don't like your coaching style, I don't like the way that you coach me, I don't like this, I don't like that, that's not going to have repercussions. It's not going to be me going, you know what, well, you're not good enough for this team, or I'm not having that, you're moving on. It was me understanding their viewpoint and working with them. So I had to understand that. What is the outside world? And this come in pre-season, and when we started, although we were trying to be objective in terms of what we were setting at clear objectives out, we had lost a couple of games and we'd gone on a bad run pre-season, injury, setback. This questionnaire come with even more honesty, because there was some coaching staff, of other individuals, and you had to be quite thick-skinned, or certainly I did, to read each individual one. But I knew, and I had the beliefs in our staff and players that we were doing the right thing. And again, that goes back to your coach beliefs and what you believe as a coach. And then what do you want them to think of us? So where are we now? But what do you want us to look like? So ultimately, let's create the picture. If perfect example, what do you want a young female player coming to watch us, a coach, your parents? What do you want them to think of us? And then again, what are the 3 most important core values that you believe should be shown at MK Dons Women? That almost underpinned all of our core values. And then what can the staff and staff do to help us move forward? And what can the players help you and us to move forward? And they were almost some of the questions that got drafted in the questionnaire. And then we made this core values, this culture. And again, where I use this journey with us, like the middle picture there, that was a photo shoot that the club did. But straight away, what's it got there? It's got one of our values on it. So not only is it that I'm going to my assistant, goalkeeping coach, physio, S&C players, but it's also speaking to our general manager, our full-time members of staff within the set. It's ensuring that they understand what we want to show as well, so they can buy into it and they can have conversations as well within the clubs, what we're trying to show. So these were the core values that we then ultimately come together with, and this is what the core values were that we showed. So ultimately with this was, what we wanted to do is we wanted to almost bracket them. And so what you see is accountability and responsibility, professionalism and commitment, hard to beat and winning mentality, and togetherness and unity. This is nothing out of the ordinary. And what I mean by that is, you probably, if you've got own core values or culture, some of these messages are consistent. But the powerful thing was, these were a lot of my beliefs still, but they come from the players. These were all things that come through the core, the questionnaire. And what you'll see underneath every one was just 2 quotes. And these quotes were taken out from the questionnaire. So these weren't my own quotes. These were taken out from the questionnaires which some players had. And there were some fantastic bits of take away messages, take ownership, study the handout, ask questions, be responsible for own performance. More responsibility and accountability on own individual efforts and performances. So they were understanding what they had to do. Professionalism, behave in a way that's respectful, be early on time, be committed, have high standards. Again, these were all coming from the players. Even things that are hard to beat. I want to look at the fixtures and teams go, yeah, but we've still got MK Dons women to play. I want clubs to go, that's tough and fear facing us. These were some fantastic messages. And it was so empowering when I was reading these questionnaires. And just to give you some, and like I said, again, you might, and I'll reflect on this towards the end of this, you might look at this and go, well, it's okay saying that you've got core values. It's okay saying these are your beliefs, but what's the difference between having your values and culture and actually showing it in practice? So a couple of, instance. So firstly, your accountability and responsibility. So, and I used this couple of examples the other day when I've been discussing with people. So there was a pre-season game and a player had just come in. She'd just been part of, just joined us, and she was really, really keen to make an impression. She had a couple of injury setbacks, but we had a pre-season friendly a couple of weeks before the start of the season, and she wasn't honest with the physio. She didn't say how much pain it was, her groin at the time, how much pain her groin was playing up. She thought that she could go through it. She was meant to be starting the pre-season friendly. She got 10 minutes in, I think one of her first sprints, she knew straight away. And again, pre-season friendly, we conceded, we go 1-0 down. Not a problem at all, as I say, but she then brought herself, has come off injured, and could see real frustration. First thing, I get a message after the game Sunday, right? Can we meet on Thursday before training? Yeah, fine. As I say, didn't really speak to her after the game. Wasn't frustrated with her. As I say, just felt that she picked up an injury during that first spell of the game. On Tuesday, she comes to the training. She said, I've got to message to all players. I've apologised. I hold myself accountable. She said, I went out, I played that performance. She said, I knew I wasn't even at 50, 60%, but I wanted to try and show for the first game of the season. And ultimately, she ended up missing 2 or 3 weeks of the first few games of the season. So actually impacted her more than kind of good. And she said, I hold my hands up, I hold myself accountability. I'm sorry. And again, the conversation was, that was really, if there was one moment where I could go, that's where accountability, perfect, that should be in practice. But again, it wasn't me saying that, you know what, yeah, you're right, that's not good enough. I said, you don't have to apologise. You learn from this experience, understand, be honest with yourself, be honest with us as staff, and actually you learn from this experience and you improve, because next time you'll know, I'm not going to rush myself. I'm going to get myself fully fit. I'm going to work hard and get myself to that level. And then on the flip side, again, I use this. This isn't always, these values aren't always shown within football itself as well. It can be away from football. So I used one. This was actually before lockdown hit. And what happened was there was an occasion where we had, we just got a new venue, so a new training venue. And basically what we had issues with the toilet, and basically by the time I'd got there, I'd been communicating that players had arrived. And just to give you some context, we're Milton Keynes based. We've got players coming from Kent, Peterborough, Cambridge. A lot of players travel to play at our level. So you're talking an hour and a half, 2 hours, just over 2 hours as well. So that when they get there, they need to be able to use the toilet as well. But they were out of order, the toilet. So that was our accountability. That wasn't good enough from us as staff communicating that. Then what happened was players were having, and this was in kind of height of the lockdown, so it wasn't like they could go to a local restaurant, anything like that. They had to go and find a local garage. So then it was a case of them driving around, finding that, coming back. Session events start at 8 o'clock. By the time they're in, 8:25 probably. By the time the warm-up started, 8:40. And to be brutally honest, I reflected as that, and the moment I could see, I said, I let them down that much, or I believed I let them down that much, that I may as well have stopped that session there, because you could tell that players were annoyed, frustrated. That wasn't the standards that were expected and drawn out. And at the end, again, it was about, I apologised, I held my hand up, I said that wasn't good enough, and I apologised. And again, no repercussion coming, it was just accountability of us as staff holding our hands up. And again, players understood that, but it was just, again, showing them values in practice. That doesn't always just look like the 11 players who are playing or starting that game or the 16 in the squad. That was another example of how we had to show that actually that wasn't good enough from our side of things, and we had to be held accountable for our actions and not being good enough with our communications. So again, and that was an example. And just so what I wanted to do was kind of, again, okay, I've spoken about how it's shown off the pitch, but also I've spoken about impacting positive performances. So when I talk about positive performances, it isn't always winning and getting 3 points. Ultimately, yes, that's what we're aiming to achieve when we set out on a Sunday. If you identify your performance as good or bad, whether you got 3 points or no points, there'll be cases where you've had a really poor performance but got 3 points. Or the flip side, you think that you've had a really good game, met a lot of the objectives, but lost the game. Now, if you judge your success and go, we haven't hit our culture because we've lost the game, or yeah, perfect, great culture because we won the game. No, what we tend to do for a positive performance, it's setting out 4 clear objectives. So what are these objectives that we put in place? We have them before the game. We go over them in the week's training, and every player will know, hopefully, and they'll just say the same thing, they'll know what the objectives are when they walk out. Now, if we feel that we've hit 3 or 4 of them objectives out of 4 and walking in, we can almost, as coaching staff and as players, hold our heads held high. And even if potentially, chances are, if we've met 3 or 4 of them, if you've lost the game, you've only lost it by small margins. If not, you're probably going to got something from the game. But we have to set out these, because if we want to impact that culture, if one of them's around, it sounds cliche, but sometimes it's winning your individual battle. It's winning your individual battle, winger against fullback, centre midfielder 3 against, or midfield 3 against midfield 3. Your 9 against the 2 centre halves. So it's winning that individual battle. Sometimes that might be one of our objectives, and we can go back to our hard to beat winning mentality, our togetherness, showing that on the pitch, and hopefully on the pitch. What I wanted to do is I didn't want to make this all about results based and what's this about, but also I wanted to take away some messages so you could see, actually, without going and watching one of my sessions right now or us on the pitch, actually, how does he show it? How does his staff show it within this journey so far? So we got promoted to this league 3 seasons ago. So we have been in the same league, and to give you a bit of context, again, players aren't on contracts, and they're not on part-time, full-time contracts. So it's not like we've put loads of finances in it. It's not like we've improved because we've suddenly gone full-time or part-time, whereas we wasn't. We've stayed at quite a consistent level. So from that 18-19 season to now, the thing that's changed is probably our recruitment, so the players we've brought in, and that culture and the values and the beliefs and what we've had to change on and off the pitch. So obviously you've got mixed figures here because we played a full season 18-19. Last season got void, and this season we've only played 8. And obviously Communication Day, hopefully that will increase gone April, so we can obviously get a clearer picture. Now, the win percentage is a bit of an anomaly. Sorry, difficult to say, but because we've only played 8 games, so if we was to lose the next couple, that would very quickly fall. So that wasn't one that I was focusing on too much. Yes, we had improved. We'd won more games than we had the previous season and nearly kind of matched our record for the season before. But the 2 I wanted to see, if you was going to look at togetherness and unity, and you was going to look at and hard work and desire, the thing that shows is them clean sheets, the average goals conceded per game. Because often, when you concede a goal, it can often come from your front line not pressing well enough, your midfield 3 losing runners, your fullbacks being beat in the wide areas, your centre-backs letting the 9 get a turn and shot away. So actually, when you conceded goals, or if you look at average goals per game, we were conceding up to 2.4, 2.2. That's down to 1.37. And the big thing was, out of them 8 games so far, we've kept 5 clean sheets. If you put both seasons put together, so 36 games, across them 36 games, we managed to keep 6. Across the first 8 this season, we managed to keep 5. And they're really things, when I look at, we can show culture on the training pitch, away from training, some of the values. But actually, if you was to come and watch us, if you was to come and go, actually, what does that show in practice? I would hope, and you're not going to get it right every game. I'm not naive to know that we played a game just before lockdown and probably didn't meet a lot of our objectives. We lost 4-1 and we played quite nowhere near our levels, maybe because we had 6 weeks off as a lockdown before that, but we didn't hit the heights. So I'm not naive to think that we've mastered this, but hopefully you can see, like I said here, the three main comparisons, the three big comparisons here was that win percentage, the average goals conceded, and then our clean sheets. And if we was going to look at a togetherness unity, I think we went 400 minutes without conceding so far this season during a spell of time. And that really brought that togetherness in. That really showed that value and really underpinned that value that we believed and that culture that we believed. And just to kind of say, I'm more than happy to say answer these questions, but the last couple of bits from me in terms of, again, just some examples of how was it shown on and off the pitch. So just a few things from me. So when we look at professionalism and commitment, so off the pitch, committed to the whole club. And what I mean by that is during lockdown, players have been asking to attend RTC Q&A sessions. I think 75% of players have been on them. So we're committed to that whole club. We're representing the MK Dons women with professionalism. And like I said, that's ensuring that we do our utmost to commit to the whole club. That isn't just our side, that's the RTC. That's not just female side, that's the male side as well. Have an investment in what they're doing as well and their journey, understanding what they're doing well. And that's really important as well. Accountability, like I said, clear communications and taking ownership. So that's players back to me and me back to players. When I ask for something, I usually give a deadline. And what I'll say is that if I communicate in training, I'll say, well, I'll get this communicated out by Thursday. The first thing that I do when that training session finishes is I set myself a reminder for the actions that I need to be held accountable for by that time. So let's say I'll say by Thursday morning, you'll have the information. So you'll have this information by then. I know I'll set that reminder off either Sunday evening or whatever. Then that way I know that, again, I can stay on top of things because I probably have 10, 12, 14 conversations after I've given a debrief in training. Now, after I've had them conversations, there are so many things that probably you're reflecting on the session, the conversations. Players might be asking why they're not on the team, maybe clipping stuff for them to see. So what I want to do is to say this accountability, I need to be making sure that I'm accountable for my own actions as well and taking that ownership. Hard to beat, winning mentality. So going above and beyond and learning from setbacks. So again, using analysis to improve performance. A big one that we did as staff, that performance that weren't good enough against Portsmouth before Christmas, us as staff, we couldn't put our fingers on the areas that went wrong. What did we do at first thing? Was we have a video which sends off the footage. It come back by Monday morning. By 6:15 that Monday morning, we were annotating that. We were clipping that. So I knew that, okay, if I left it till Monday evening and then by the time I'd done it, it was late and then we trained Tuesday, players might have not seen that. If I do that first thing Monday morning, 6:15, I know that I can then send a message by 7:30 and when I've got to go to work and say, this is what I've clipped, this is what I want you to look for, preparation for training is going to be around this. And again, we're using that kind of circle or cycle of accountability. That's my communication. This is where we're going to be hard to beat. This is how we're going to set a winning mentality. And it kind of goes in that circle and journey. And then together in unity. And the thing that, again, is really powerful is it's not just what we're doing on the pitch. This lockdown has been so powerful for what we've done. So what we mean by that is players have been reaching out. Players have been sending each other messages. Players have been leading socials themselves. They've been communicating and leading these socials. They've been giving each other support. And I think that's so powerful. That hasn't come from me asking players to do this. Players have been leading on stuff. They've got their own social group. There's actually a player who's been injured for the whole season who we signed in pre-season. And she's been joining every week. She messaged me the other day and said, I found so much out about players that if this weren't happening during lockdown, she probably would have felt isolated on her own. She hasn't been part of that team environment yet, but she's seen these cultures and values being shown. And just the final little bit, so on the pitch. So again, how do we show it on the pitch? So professionalism and commitment, act in a professional way. So that's win, lose or draw. Hopefully you would be able to see that. And a big one for me, which I say to players, not allowing the session design whether other players to impact your commitment. I always start my first session on a Tuesday with chaos. And what I mean by that, I like to make it 1, 2, 3 touch, high tempo, goals involved. And just that first thing is, right, we turn up to training, we're here, we're ready, mindset's on. But after that, it might have to be a pattern of play. It might have to be set pieces. It might have to be we split off into unit work. It might be individual coaching. But don't let that impact your desire to want to improve. So don't go, okay, now we're going through patterns. I'm going to go through the motions. Okay, it's pouring down with rain. Oh, you know what? I'm not really going to work as hard because it's cold, it's wet. No, show that constantly. Accountability, again, holding up for mistakes and errors, communicating these standards during the game when not met. Like I said, we pride ourselves on quite a few RTC players that have stepped up from the last 2 or 3 years. I used to be our RTC centre manager, so I have real belief in youth, and I have real belief in that investment in terms of not just for the fact because they're young, they obviously have to still be good enough. We have our development squad, so if you don't feel that journey is a right fit yet. But being able to hold yourself accountable for mistakes and not being punished for them. So often when we have a mistake, it won't be us as staff shouting and going, that's not good enough. They're human beings. I make mistakes at work. I make mistakes in my coaching session. I make mistakes in my planning. But they don't shout at me. They don't go, oh, you got the teams wrong here. Oh, you forgot to wash your bibs or something like that. No, they understand, and I hold myself accountable for that. So it has to work both ways as well. Togetherness and unity, so be competitive in the sessions, games, support teammates for every battle. Like I said, I'm not expecting to have 25 players who are all friends, best friends. In the environment we work in, yes, we've got that social element, but also there is an impact of picking the 11 who are performing, who are consistently performing, and not everyone's going to have the same things that they enjoy. The same hobbies. So actually it's understanding there's going to be that difference, but having that togetherness throughout. And then the hard to beat and winning mentality. So winning your individual battles. I said that's sometimes our objective. Walking off the pitch knowing you give everything you possibly could. And that's for players and staff. If we felt like we did something wrong or we didn't help them, often I think back, and those of you who again know the women's game, Watford were a fantastic side. We had to play the first game of the season this season at home. Big pitch at Stadium MK. We knew, I mean, they're pushing top 2 this season, and they were last season. So we knew that was going to be, and we were probably a week away from where we realistically wanted to be from the first game of the season. We went in at half time and we were 4-0 down in that game. Now, what we could have done as staff was we could have gone, that's not good enough. We could have sat there, we could have got annoyed, frustrated. But what I said to the staff at half-time was we have to stand through them at every point and every minute during this second half. And ultimately, from that, it sounds silly, but we won the second half 1-0. And that actually gave us lots of confidence because although you lose the game 4-1 in the end, we grew, we developed, and we took that onto our run of games, which is why I felt we did so well. And then ultimately, at the end, like I said, it's us as staff as well. We have to be there for them. How many times potentially where things aren't going right, then you just kind of, the good stuff, you're there praising performance, the bad stuff, then sat down, it's not going well, I don't know what to do. We have to support them through that, and we have to give them that togetherness while we're doing that as well, making sure that we're supporting that. So again, that was kind of, I think, just about half an hour. Hopefully I haven't talked for too long there, but just the final thing, couple of things from me. It goes back to my question, which I always ask myself, and I continue to ask myself. I've obviously said are yours in this instance, but are we constantly following our values as players and staff? That's the thing that underpins a lot of our stuff. Are we showing them? And after the games, did we show them? Did we show them in the weeks leading up to that? Is that why that poor performance happened? Because we weren't doing stuff during the training, during our training environment. And just final thing, just a couple of things. I'll probably, obviously, you might have got this through Twitter, but that's my Twitter handle if you want to reach out and have further conversations about that, or my email address. So I know obviously that's probably been a bit of a snippet, and I know some questions that I've not can't see them, but I know some of the questions that have been fired away. So I'll answer them as well. But if you want to reach out on kind of Twitter or for email, I'm more than happy to have either, as I say, answer questions or more kind of one-to-one calls as well, if that's something you want to see. So, yeah, and that's that. I'll pass you back to Craig because I think you might obviously have questions or come through.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlie. That was great.